Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses who are helping guide our committee through this study. Mr. Stanford, I'd like to start with you. We've now had 4 of the CEOs reappear before our committee. What struck me when Mr. Weston was here, and indeed from all of them, I think the reason why so many people across Canada have such a lack of trust in the grocery retail sector is because families from coast to coast to coast are struggling, and yet you see this corporate sector still doing quite well. And the reason why it's such an emotional issue is because they are selling not just any product, but the necessities of life. I mean, that's the thing, that we're all equal. We all need to eat to survive. And even if when it comes to their medications, that's still a reality. I know Mr. Weston's salary is about 431 times the average employee. None of the CEOs were able to tell this committee how many of their employees are using a food bank just to get by, even though that they may be working full time. But I really appreciate how in your handout to the committee over page 2 and 3, you really sort of illustrated the point that despite claims that this is a low margin industry, that does not necessarily, and I think it's a misnomer, it doesn't reflect on the fact that it's not a profitable business. And I think to simply explain it, you can have relatively the same margin over a number of years, and so that may look low or static, but in grocery retail, it's doubled. You've shown that. But even so, if their gross revenues are going up, that margin is still going to translate into a fairly substantial profit. And we've seen that when you compare quarters year over year. Is there anything you just sort of wanted to add to that point from your opening remarks?
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. I do think that issue of the profit margin has been misunderstood and perhaps deliberately misportrayed as a sign that the industry is not actually profiting from food inflation. We've heard the claim that if you buy $100 worth of groceries, well, only $3 to $4 of that actually went to the profits of the supermarket. We have to adjust that analogy today because a cart of groceries costs $200 now, not $100. So only $6 to $8 of it went to the profits of the supermarket. But still, that makes it seem inconsequential, and it's not. First of all, as I noted, food retail is not a capital-intensive industry, so the amount of invested capital in that sector is not high. It's barriers to new entrants, including the market power of the companies that are already there and have consolidated their power through all of the mergers and acquisitions that have occurred over the last generation that were detailed in that Competition Bureau report very helpfully. That's what keeps it so cozy as an oligopoly and has allowed them to take advantage of the uncertainty and the disruption associated with the pandemic to increase their margins. So first of all, it's false that the margins didn't increase. Secondly, even if they seem small, it's a large amount of profit relative to the capital that's invested.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. And I'm going to load up 2 questions here just in the interest of time. You have stated in your handout in your opening remarks that the carbon tax absolutely pales in comparison to the profits in the oil and gas sector as a driver of inflation. In previous handouts, you've shown that oil and gas over the last 3 years have seen their net profits increase by over 1,000%. Can you just sort of extrapolate from those massive profits in oil and gas, how that's affected food prices? Because I think we do need to look a little bit upstream. And also, I noticed that you also wrote a little bit in your handout about how even executives in the grocery retail sector are also doing stock buybacks and dividend payouts. And, I have a friend back in my riding of Couch in Malahat Langford who's looked at the financials of oil and gas. He's noted that the oil and gas sector has shifted to a capital discipline, flat growth, and high shareholder return strategy. They too are using their massive profits not to reinvest in industry, not to pay to the Canadian people, but really to send to shareholders, and those are the primary beneficiaries. Do you see correlations also in the grocery retail sector?
Oh, you're quite right, sir. In fact, your initial question talked about the necessities of life, and this being one reason why Canadians are so upset about food prices. But there are other necessities of life as well, including housing and energy and other things that we must buy. And in many of those cases, companies were able to take advantage of the disruptions of the pandemic to increase their own profits. And you could say this is just how the market works. Suppliers will charge what the market will bear. In my own view, I think there's both ethical and economic reasons to challenge the ability of companies with that market power to increase prices at a moment of economic and social disruption. Energy prices initially in the period up until mid-2022 were the leading cause of inflation in Canada, and the profits captured by those companies made the supermarket profits look like spare change, really. It was enormous. Now energy profits have come back down, in part because of the normalization of supply relationships, and food retail profits have stayed quite high. But in both cases, they earned huge amounts of profit, contributed significantly to Canadian inflation, and then the macroeconomic after effects of inflation, including the high interest rates that we're experiencing now. And they have so much money, they literally don't know what to do with it. So that's why in both the energy sector and the food retail sector and some other sectors, you've seen a surge in share buybacks by companies who are just saying, oh, well, we're going to find a way to pay this back to investors. The federal government, of course, has a new modest tax on shareholder share buybacks. I think that's a good idea. I think it should be expanded, and other measures should be taken to capture some of the froth that is represented in those record profits in both food, retail, and energy and other sectors.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Stanford. Thank you, Mr. McGregor.